Welcome to Eat Well, Travel Better, the Business of Food Travel podcast with Eric Wolf and Ashi Vale, where we help you become a better industry professional by gaining inspiration from some of the world's most successful people in the food and beverage tourism industry. With each episode, we meet these leaders and examine their secrets of success. We reveal the obstacles and challenges they have faced, along with their solutions and triumphs, and give you ideas and inspirations for many of the same business issues that you may be facing as well. And now for today's episode. In this episode number 19 of Eat Well, Travel Better, join us as we speak with Christie Peters, a former model who left her modeling career to return to her hometown, Saskatoon, in the Canadian prairies, a land of opportunity, a kind of Wild West, where innovative and passionate entrepreneurs can do more and innovate more quickly than in a bigger city. Today, Christie is the successful chef-owner of the Hollows and Primal Pasta restaurants in Saskatoon, Canada. Through her unconventional sourcing and matching of the ingredients found in the harsh climate of the province of Saskatchewan, Christie has been able to achieve a remarkable level of recognition in just a few short years. Welcome, Christie.
Thank you.
Welcome, Christie. We're so excited to speak with you today. I have to say, I don't think we've interviewed a model before or a former model before, and we'd love to hear how you made that transition from being a model to the food industry.
Well, I was modeling in Toronto and Europe, and I realized it was not a sustainable career, especially as I was getting older, and that I truly didn't have any skills, any practical skills. So I thought, what's the most important thing in life to me? And that is, we do have to eat 3 times a day. We do have to feed our families and our friends. And so I just thought, if I could learn the skill of cooking, then that would be something that, even if I didn't become a chef, I could carry with me through the rest of my life as a practical skill.
That's fantastic to hear. And tell us a little bit more about how you made that happen. It's very easy to start restaurants, but you have successfully run 2 restaurants. It's been over 7 years now, and we'd love to hear about that trajectory.
It all started when I was working as a hostess in restaurants, and I noticed the restaurateurs and the chefs having the best life ever, being able to walk around and entertain and host. So I thought that the best way to gain that into that world would be to learn how to cook. So I decided to find a chef that I thought was doing a very good job of running a restaurant and go work directly under them. So I traveled to Vancouver, and Chef Rob Feeney had his own cooking show. So I had been watching him on TV, and I thought I could go learn under him. So I traveled there. I just offered to work for free until they decided to hire me because I had no experience. And it ended up becoming a career for me for 10 years. And then I decided to come back to Saskatoon and open my own restaurant.
And you came back to Saskatoon because that's where your family is that right?
Yeah, my family and friends are here, and I've always felt a connection to this place, and it's always had real meaning to me to do something in my hometown.
Nice. It must be difficult to run a restaurant in a place with such a harsh climate and to source local products and ingredients. You know, you don't have access to all of the products that you would have, say, in California or Florida. How does that work? I mean, clearly you have enough going on that you're able to have a viable business, but how is running a business different in a place like Saskatoon than it would be in a place like Vancouver?
The seasons are so different, especially Vancouver. It just has perfectly 4 seasons where it's able to flow from one thing to the next. But in Saskatchewan, it's very different. There is a very short summer and a very long, cold, isolating winter. In order to work with the seasons, which is very important to me to capture the essence of the place through the food, we had to do a few different things, starting with hiring a horticulturist on staff. So we have a horticulturist that grows vegetables during the hot summer months for us, directly for the restaurant, in different garden plots throughout the city. So they're all very close garden plots. And I'm able to visit them and really see daily changes in what's going on and harvest unique things like little shoots that are popping up, or different baby vegetables at different times, or even some interesting herbs and weeds. We take all the vegetables from the garden that we get, and as soon as they start popping up, the first thing we gather them, we dry, we preserve, we pickle, we ferment, we make syrups, we make jams, we do all sorts of things to preserve these vegetables so that we're able to use them all winter long. So at the restaurant, we actually have a massive root cellar where we cellar a lot of the vegetables, and we also keep all of our canned jars and our ferments and our dried goods. And we basically run off that until it runs out. And since it's been 7 years, we're able to really make it work and make it last until the next spring. So it's very, very good and very challenging.
So do you run out of things then before the end of the season?
A few times we have, and then in that case, we just start searching for any farmers who have things left in their cellar. It actually can be kind of inspiring because you're able to talk to other people and see at this time of year what actually is left. And then you have to be very creative. If a farmer has a bunch of carrots that are just sitting in his cellar, then you have to make a creative menu with carrots and beets and cabbage, which is usually the only things left at that time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But we also do keep our horticulturist busy throughout the winter months by having her grow basement gardens for us in both restaurants. So we have lights and in some cases aquaponics, which is using fish to fertilize the vegetables. So she grows fresh greens and herbs and flowers for us, edible flowers, all winter long.
That is incredible. Christy, I also read that you compost a lot of your waste. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into that and how that works?
Yeah, I worked for a few different places abroad in Europe and in Vancouver and in California that were doing composting, but just not to the extent that I would have liked to have seen, which is funny. I worked at so many amazing restaurants doing so many amazing things, and I got to learn so many of different things from everyone, but none of the restaurants ever took it as far as I wanted to take it, which is why I was so excited to open my own restaurant where I could take all of the unique things from these other restaurants, but then take it to a completely deeper level that I would have liked to have seen. So here, when we came, there was no composting programs in the city. It was absolutely a free-for-all. So we started our own compost program with a local farmer. So we would make our own compost kind of boxes and things and send them to his farm. And then once the horticulturist got hired on, we would give a lot of it to her, and she would help us incorporate that into her plots of land and her gardens throughout the city. So truly a full circle thing happening. So any of the food waste, or basically we compost everything from food waste to paper towels to napkins to our compostable straws. Even our sponges that we use on the tables are made of loofah and cellulose, and they're completely compostable. So we're taking things to a pretty extreme level. It's been really good, especially business-wise, because we got a lot of recognition early on in the city for doing that, being one of the only places to create our own system. But also it saves us a lot of money on fertilizer and helps the gardens grow that much better. And it also saves us money on garbage pickup. So we have one dumpster that is never full, and it's only picked up once a month, and that's for 2 restaurants. It really does reduce a lot of the waste and save us a lot of money.
So you were known for saying big risks and big payoffs. So was this one of those big risks when you were the first restaurant to really be doing this? And it must have been unnerving to see if your customers would actually go for this or if they would ostracize you for it.
Absolutely. It was definitely a different concept in Saskatchewan at the time. We are very much a meat and potatoes, big protein, big steak kind of a place is what we walked into. And it's really evolved, and people are really receptive to it, which has been very, very nice to see. We've trained our guests, I think, over the years to have less meat and more vegetables and more grains and pulses, because Saskatchewan's really known for growing lots of the world's lentils and chickpeas and lots of different grains and pulses. So we're kind of trying to focus on that as well.
Have your restaurants inspired other restaurants to do the same in the area or outside the area?
Yeah, we have definitely seen now today there's a new program through the city that actually composts for restaurants. So we're happy to have that join our community and be something other restaurants can actually take part in now. We use that system as well, but we still do keep some of our own aside just for the gardens and things, because it is it's precious stuff.
Do you have advice for other aspiring restaurateurs in the business? It's truly wonderful to hear that you have sustained both these restaurants for 7 years, and I would love to hear if you have advice to give other people interested in opening restaurants.
I feel that having investors for me was not an option. I decided I've seen too many restaurants in the past with investors go out of business, or the investors have too much say in the business, or it's just not the people who are making the restaurant, it's not their money, so they are a little bit more wasteful with it. So my advice would be just to, even if you have investors, it would be to start small and build, and really truly look at what it's going to take to make the business and how you can do that as cheaply as possible off the start. Because if you have astronomical startup costs, it's going to be extremely difficult to ever catch up and get ahead. So with our business, I think the reason we've been so successful is because we started with very little startup costs. Part of the sustainable thing that we did was collect used and vintage beautiful antique items and things like that, but that are a lot cheaper than buying new, and also built better and last longer. So we were able to have used kitchen equipment that is built really, really well and has lasted generations, and just maintain that. We were also able to collect vintage glassware and plateware and everything for the restaurant. So it already exists on this earth. There's so many beautiful items out there. We don't need to buy brand new all the time. Plus, the quality is higher of some of these older used items, and the beauty is there. People enjoy using these old crystal glasses, and they enjoy seeing the different array of cocktail glasses and all the vintage plates that we've collected. So that really saved a lot of our startup cost, but it's also worked for our business model because it was sustainable. Also, any waste that's going to leave the building is potential money that's going to leave your building. Everything from what I was saying about the compost being very valuable as fertilizer to anything really. We're having a lot of fat that we were unable to compost. It was basically coming from the whole animals we were butchering, and we would use a lot of it in our cooking, but once it had been used a few times, we would be unable to use this fat. And instead of throwing it in the garbage, I thought, why don't we make our own soap in the old pioneer style using fat and lye, and make a very simple hand soap for the restaurants. So even that, I didn't want to see that fat leaving the building without a way of making money off that. In the end, my advice is just to really be looking at everything with fresh eyes and seeing the value in all of the things, because the profit margin in restaurants is so small that any little thing slipping past can hurt you. So it's just important to be realistic.
Christie, from a practical standpoint, how much did you or can one start a restaurant with monetarily?
Well, here in Saskatchewan, in the Wild West and the land of opportunity, as I call it, we were able to start our restaurant for a small personal loan of $20,000. And that was just a line of credit. Found a building that we thought was originally too big, but it was a turnkey operation. It had been a Chinese restaurant for over 50 years, owned by one family. And they really loved us and the fact that we were willing to clean up the building. And so we just ended up taking it over, and all in with our starting inventory and everything, it was $20,000. So the second restaurant we opened, Primal Pasta, we had enough savings from the Hollows restaurant that we were able to buy the building and buy the business that was inside. And again, it was an old Chinese restaurant. So we got all the old equipment that was in there. We just cleaned it up and fixed it up. And the decor was actually very beautiful underneath all of the layers of plastic and posters they had and strange drop ceilings. And we just cleaned up what was in there, and we were able to start that one for $20,000 as well. And I do all the design for the restaurants as well. Like the decor is all pieced together from vintage items that I've collected and found. So it's all, again, done on a shoestring budget, but it ends up looking really high quality because of the beautiful antiques and things that we can find here in Saskatchewan. It's a good way to start a restaurant for a small amount of money, and then hopefully you can make some money.
Thanks for sharing, Christy. That's pretty amazing. 20,000 and a lot of hard work. And that's really quite fascinating. Can you tell us how you were able to bring on your first clients to the restaurant? Was it a location that had a lot of foot traffic? Did you spend money on marketing? How did you make it work?
That's actually a whole other story. This old abandoned Chinese restaurant that we took over was in a neighborhood called Riversdale, and it is known as the west side where you don't go. It was a defunct area that was the old Chinatown at one time, but had become overrun. All the businesses had closed. People wouldn't want to park their cars on this street. They thought it was dangerous. There's actually a halfway house across the street from the restaurant. The Chinese restaurant that we took over had actually been sitting closed for over 7 years. It was all abandoned around us. People thought we were pretty crazy to open in this location, but it is very central to downtown. And it's also very close to the beautiful river that runs through. And it's also close to the farmer's market. I had been living in Vancouver and seen Gastown in Vancouver and how thriving and beautiful that had regenerated, and there was beautiful restaurants right next to needle exchanges and things like that. So I knew that from a bigger city perspective that model could work. So I kind of had a vision that I would create the Gastown of Saskatoon here in Riversdale. There was maybe one other coffee shop on the street, and they were happy that we were in the neighborhood. I think even I always say no publicity is bad publicity as well. And I think even the fact that we were opening a restaurant in this area got people talking, and people were really, even if they were talking about how crazy we were, it was a point of interest to them. That really helped, as well as the building is quite iconic in Saskatoon. It has a big old neon sign, and the fact that we refurbished that and brought it back to life really made people happy in the community. Other than that, we kind of promised ourselves we wouldn't spend any money on advertising or marketing, and that we would just be that place that was spread by word of mouth, and our reputation would grow as more people came and different people would tell other people. And we've never paid for advertising ever. So we've just been really lucky.
That's an amazing story. I've talked to so many restaurateurs throughout the world, and it just seems to me that the number one thing they can't wait to do is to go out and spend money. And it was your circumstances, your common sense, and your frugality that I think has enabled you to have 2 or 3 successful businesses and really to thrive without the need to actually spend money on those kinds of things that many people think are absolutely essential when it comes to marketing a business.
I fully agree. And I just look at it in a very realistic way. And I think a lot of people have this strange way of looking at that things. They think exactly what you said, that you have to spend money, you spend a lot of money to make money, and have very expensive things and buy everything brand new and to impress the people. And it just financially didn't make sense to me. And I had to do what made plain simple sense, which was do it for as little as possible and keep everything of value inside the restaurant and make sure that we weren't losing any value anywhere.
Thank you for your advice to other restaurateurs, Christy. If you had to give yourself or a younger version of yourself advice, what would it be?
I tell myself that I need a more work-life balance. Since I was a young chef, I've always read biographies and things of other chefs and famous chefs and different life stories of chefs and restaurateurs, and they all end in tragedy, or not tragedy, but they all seem to have, they succeed at the highest level, but then their personal lives, there's no joy. So I always made a promise to myself that I would be the best restaurateur and chef that I can be while still maintaining balance in my life. And that would be my measure of success, is if I still had the balance in my life, I could still strive for more. But as a younger chef, I basically worked 12-hour days for 10 years and didn't see the light of day for 10 years. So maybe my advice would have been a little bit more work-life balance back then as well.
But you've achieved that now.
Yeah, I have. It's after 7 years, it's starting to happen. We've got a really amazing team built here, and I'm able to oversee and do the pick and choose the jobs that I want to do, and menu design and teaching the team and overseeing and things like that, rather than having to actually be the one cooking on the line every day. Even though I do most days still do that, but I have a choice now.
And what does it mean, make it nice or make it twice? Before the show today, we were talking and you said that this was a quote that inspired you. Could you explain what that means and how it inspired you?
Yeah, I'm actually not sure where that quote came from, but it's been in kitchens as long as I can remember. Chefs would always say, "Make it nice or make it twice," and it basically means do a proper job or don't bother doing it at all. Because if you don't do a proper job, you're just going to have to do it again, and that's just going to be a wasted time and a wasted product. We actually have a sign in the kitchen that says "Make it nice or make it twice," just to always remind people to be present and do the best that you can for every dish, because there's no point in doing it any other way.
That's fantastic business advice, just full stop. I mean, in anything you do, marketing, project management, you got to do it right or you're going to have to do it all over again.
And it doesn't feel good if you don't do it the best you can.
That as well.
Christie, are you reading any books currently? Do you have a favorite cookbook you'd like to recommend?
Yeah, actually, I'm reading two right now. The one that I'm reading is the fermentation cookbook by Noma by David Zilber and Renee Redzepi. They have a fermentation lab in Copenhagen where they are taking unique ingredients and using fermentation and different techniques to create different flavor profiles and really opening up the possibility of ingredients and also ways of preserving. So that's a huge thing for me living in Saskatchewan, to be able to have different almost inedible ingredients, but once you put them through the fermentation process, they open up and have these beautiful unique flavors. And also it's a way of preserving. So I can take things from the spring and rhubarb or something and ferment that and leave that and have it in the middle of winter and people get this burst of spring flavor in the middle of winter. So I'm learning a lot from that. And then the other book I'm reading is the new Joe Beef cookbook called Surviving the Apocalypse, which is also very close to my heart, that subject, because often I will say that we run the restaurants as if it is going to be the apocalypse. Like that's why we don't waste anything. We make everything in-house. We have a gardener on staff. We save seeds. We're stockpiling salt just in case we need to preserve and cure and pickle, and you never know what's coming around the next bend. So there's actually a shortage of kosher salt right now, which is hilarious. And I don't know, it's across Canada. Other chefs are posting on Facebook, "Where's the kosher salt?" So I have some in my basement.
Would you be willing to share some foods that you have fermented recently, or specifically foods in Saskatoon or Saskatchewan that you have repurposed?
Mm-hmm. Well, we did do some rhubarb this year, which was really nice. Which I was saying, it's one of the first things to pop out of the ground in the spring. The other thing that is really exciting for me as an ingredient is dandelion. The city of Saskatoon has stopped spending money. I don't know if it's a money thing or it's a mix of a money thing and a toxicity thing, but they've stopped spraying for dandelions around the city. So all of the parks and boulevards have a ton of dandelions on them, but they're all unsprayed, natural, ready to eat, if you will. But they're a cancer fighting food, and they're also amazing for bees to have so many dandelions in bloom, and they're so plentiful. So I decided I better incorporate these into the menu somehow. So we harvest the blossoms, and then we dip them in a tempura batter, and then we fry them, and we make these beautiful crunchy dandelion fritters, and people are going crazy for them. My gardens, I've picked all the heads off all the dandelions. Now none of them are even growing. So I have to go source them from outside the city and things like that. But what could be considered a pest is actually something that can be very delicious and very healthful for us to eat. So that was one of the ones I was excited about.
I've never heard of dandelion tempura. That actually sounds good. I think I could try that.
It is really beautiful. It almost has the texture of like little bits of cod or something, like a little fish and chip, with a touch of interesting bitterness to it. But it's a nice thing. We've
Nice.
fermented some chilies from the garden as well, and made a little spicy aioli that we dip the fritters in, and people are just loving that. So it's a nice way to connect the two.
Well, now you've said a couple things to sell us on coming to Saskatoon and trying your restaurant, but clearly you must have some fantastic memories of food while traveling.
Oh, absolutely. I haven't traveled as much as I've been working, like I said, toiling away in the kitchens. I was able to get out to Spain for a month, and we ate at what was the third best restaurant in the world at the time, called Magritte's. And I was just overjoyed to be in that dining room and have experienced that level of dining. The restaurant was on a countryside, so they were using a lot of local things and that they had grown themselves, and local meat and all that. So it was really inspiring. I was also really excited to see that they had a fly in the dining room, because with our compost program, there can often be like a fly in our dining room. And then I get devastated because I think, oh my God, there's a fly in the dining room. It's terrible. But then even at the best restaurants in the world, they can still have, they're still in the countryside, and they can still have a fly in the dining room, and it's not the end of the world. So that was a nice lesson.
Christy, tell us about your love for laksa soup.
Because we're in the old Chinatown in Riversdale, there's a old Asian restaurant that's right next door to us, and they serve the most beautiful laksa. So I often sneak off and go share a bowl of that with my business partner and life partner, Kyle. But that's our favorite soup. So we sneak away and have that on our, as keeps us alive.
And you also like spaghetti bolognese. I'm a big Italian fan as well. Is that what inspired you to start Primal Pasta, or was there another reason?
My secret reason was because I wanted to have spaghetti bolognese on tap, if you will, at the ready, constantly, forever. I felt like I would be in heaven. It's kind of the same feeling a young restaurateur gets when you first get your beer taps installed. That you feel like you're the most amazing person in the world when you get your own beer taps. But having bolognese on tap is also pretty special. But what inspired us to open Primal Pasta was us in Saskatchewan have been known as the breadbasket of the world for many years. And we grow a lot of the world's grains. And many farmers have started to bring back heritage grains and really beautiful varieties of rye grain and red fife wheat and just different varieties that have been lost. Being in Saskatchewan, where there's wheat fields surrounding us, we thought, what better way to showcase grain in Saskatchewan than to do homemade pasta, where it's very good quality grains that we can source here, and it really lends itself well to having all the preserves and doing the whole animal butchery that we do, because all the little braised bits can be added into the pasta, and it really stretches the whole animal, as well as lots of our preserves, our canned tomatoes and our dried tomatoes and our eggplants that we grow that we preserve. And it's just such a great, it was just a no-brainer basically.
What was the inspiration behind the menu for the Hollows? Did you start off as wanting to make it a sustainable restaurant, using every part of the animal? What was the thought behind that?
I just really wanted to be able to be free, and the menu would grow and change as I grew and changed as a chef. So I didn't necessarily say local as part of my inspiration, but it does turn out that most of the high quality and seasonal and sustainable ingredients are mostly local. So, but I just was afraid to use that word on the menu because I still wanted to use chocolate from France and, coffee and sea salts and all the different beautiful things you can get from Italy and Spain, and like olives and oysters and things like that. So we still do showcase those beautiful ingredients when we can get them when they're very high quality. Definitely the inspiration for the menu just comes from gardening and what is actually growing in the gardens, as well as specifically what's growing in our gardens, because when we got here, there wasn't a lot of choice, a lot of variety of vegetables. Like I had seen so many different varieties of heirloom vegetables in Vancouver and San Francisco and Europe. And then coming here, it was very much just red beets, orange carrots, and cabbage, and one kind of potato. So I had collected a bunch of seeds on my travels, and we started to grow different varieties of things, really unique things. And then I think that has really caught on, and I've met more people and made more connections in Saskatchewan with people who are growing beautiful heirloom vegetables, and so that's just kind of grown as the restaurant's grown. But that was our original inspiration, was just unique things that can grow in this climate.
Now, Christy, you paint a very pretty picture, and everything sounds like it's gone quite well for you. But there must have been some warning flashing lights or something that has given you pause in your business. Can you share some of those frustrations that you've had in the past 7 years? Things that have really made you wonder, am I doing the right thing, or things that you just wish that you had done differently?
Say one time I set up a compost system in the basement of the restaurant because I thought it would be fine, and then it all of a sudden the whole dining room was super disgusting smelling and then I had to haul all the compost out of the building, and it was a really, really big undertaking. So that was a big mistake I made.
Well, I was doing some reading, and I guess one of your pet peeves is people who don't follow through, and that's one of mine as well. When does that happen to you? How did that come to be?
That's a good question. That's always just been a pet peeve of mine. I'm really lucky to have a very good team around me that always does follow through on things. So it's very shocking to me when somebody doesn't, because it's so rare that it really, really takes me back. Number one would probably just be the dishwashers. The dishwashers, they don't follow through all the time. They often don't show up, but that can be one of the hardest things for restaurateurs and the kitchens, and that people don't really talk about, is the dishwashing position is one of the hardest in the kitchen. And we do treat them like gold, and we pay them more, and we give them whatever they want, but it's just such a hard job that it's often a rotating door and really difficult to find good dishwashers that will actually follow through on being there.
What happens during those days when your dishwasher doesn't show up? Does everybody pitch in? Do you have somebody who's a backup dishwasher? How does that work?
Often it'll be me. Often because I will be overseeing, and I'll be the extra person on that's just running the pass and checking the plates. So then I'll have the extra time to go in there. Plus, it's a secret little pleasure of mine, because when you're in the dish pit, all your worries melt away, and you just have to worry about putting the dishes through the rack and putting the dishes through the rack. So there isn't that, it's just like a magical place where all of a sudden you're focused on a task and you don't have to have all the stress of the weight of the restaurant. So it is kind of a funny little thing, but often the staff will help out.
It's an oasis of mindlessness in an otherwise very busy Grand Central type environment.
Absolutely.
What's next for you, Christy? You seem like the kind of person who has more than 24 hours in her day. What's next on your menu?
Well, we just recently opened both restaurants 7 days a week, so that's a huge expansion. And then we also just opened a lounge at the Hollows called the Wildebeest Room. So that's just a whole nother ball game, is having a lounge that's open late and just for drinks. So those are two big things that have happened this year. My team is actually trying to slow me down and telling me that we need to get a grasp on that first before we can expand anymore. So I think that's going to be it for a little while. But my dream would be to someday buy another building that is small and that I could do fine dining, tasting menu only restaurant, where it would be a destination place where it would be reservation only, and it would attract people from all over the world so they could see Saskatchewan cuisine. So that would be my end goal.
Well, that sounds like a wonderful dream to have, and we wish you well on your business journey, and I hope that we get a chance to meet you one day in Saskatoon.
Oh, that would be so lovely.
Well, thank you for your time today, Christy. It was a pleasure chatting with you, and we look forward to hopefully meeting you one day.
And hopefully trying those dandelion fritters.
Yeah. Oh, that's so nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank Thanks for listening today. The Eat Well, Travel Better podcast is brought to you by the World Food Travel Association, the world's leading authority on food and beverage tourism. We empower local communities and businesses with the food and beverage tourism knowledge and tools needed to reach new consumers and gain a competitive edge. Founded in 2003, every year we shepherd a community of almost 100,000 professionals in over 100 countries. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And you can learn more about us, subscribe to our newsletter, and join our family at worldfoodtravel.org. Until next time, eat well and travel better.